My dear English learners, today you are not just listening to English, you are stepping into a living story. It is a story of courage, of sacrifice, and of hope strong enough to change the world. This is the story of a man who started in a small village, but grew to change the entire world. He was a boy who played barefoot in the fields, who listened to the old stories told by the fire, and who once felt the deep sadness of losing his father too soon. But that boy became something more. He became a leader, a voice of justice and a symbol of freedom for millions. His name is Nelson Mandela, a man who spent 27 years behind prison walls but walked out with forgiveness instead of anger. A man who carried the dream of equality and refused to let it die even when the world seemed against him. This is not just a lesson in English. This is a lesson in life. So stay with me until the very end, for this story carries both tears and hope. Let's begin. Nelson Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in a small village called Mvezo in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. His birth name was Roli Lala, which in his language means pulling the branch of a tree. Some also say it means troublemaker. Later, people would see how fitting this name was because Mandela grew up to challenge injustice with boldness and courage. His father, Gadla Henry Mfakaniswa, was a respected chief and advisor to the Thembu king. His mother, Nosekeni Fani, was a woman of faith and kindness who taught him humility and compassion. Although his family was not rich, they were deeply respected in their community. Mandela's childhood was simple, but full of joy. He lived in a hut made of mud and straw, surrounded by open fields and gentle hills. There was no electricity, no running water, and no modern luxuries. But young Mandela felt free. He loved running barefoot through the fields, herding cattle, and swimming in clear streams. At night, he sat by the fire and listened to elders tell stories of brave warriors and wise leaders. These tales planted a dream deep inside him to one day serve his people. When Mandela was just 9 years old, tragedy struck. His father died of illness. It was a painful moment, but it also changed the course of his life. After his father's death, his mother took him to live with Chief Jongintaba, a royal leader of the Thembu people. The chief welcomed Mandela like a son and introduced him to a bigger world, one of leadership responsibility and tradition. Johannesburg was a city of energy, but also of sharp division. White people lived in fine houses and earned good wages. Black people, on the other hand, were forced into crowded townships, working long hours for little pay. Mandela felt the injustice everywhere he went. He rented a small room in one of the poorest neighborhoods and took different jobs, first as a night watchman, then as a clerk in a law firm. Life was difficult, but he never gave up on his dream of education. At night, he studied by candlelight, determined to earn a law degree. Eventually, Mandela enrolled at the University of Witwatersrand, where he studied law. He was one of only a few black students there, and he often faced discrimination. He saw that the law was being used as a weapon against his people, and he wanted to learn how to fight back with that same weapon. During this time, Mandela joined the African National Congress ANC, an organization fighting for the rights of black South Africans. Along with other young activists, he helped form the ANC Youth League, giving energy and new ideas to the struggle. Mandela's speeches were full of passion and vision. He spoke of justice, equality, and a South Africa where all people, black and white, could live together in peace. One of his most famous lines was, "It always seems impossible until it's done." In 1944, Mandela married Evelyn Ntoko Mase, a nurse who shared his dream of freedom. In 1948, new apartheid laws made life even harder for black South Africans. They dictated where people could live, work, and even whom they could marry. Mandela and his colleagues organized peaceful protests inspired by the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. Thousands joined, risking their jobs, homes, and lives. But the government answered with violence. Protesters were beaten, arrested, sometimes even killed. Mandela himself was arrested more than once, but he refused to stop. In 1952, Mandela and his friend Oliver Tambo opened South Africa's first black law firm. They defended poor black citizens who had no voice in court. By day, he fought in the courtroom. By night, he planned with the ANC. Yet, as the years passed, Mandela realized that peaceful protest alone might not be enough. The road ahead would demand even greater sacrifice. In 1960, tragedy shook South Africa. During a peaceful protest in the town of Sharpeville, police opened fire on the crowd. 69 people were killed and hundreds were injured. The world was horrified. For Mandela, this moment was a turning point. He realized that peaceful protest alone would not bring change. The government banned the ANC, forcing Mandela and his comrades underground. Together, they formed a secret armed group called Umkhonto weSizwe, which means Spear of the Nation. Their goal was not to harm innocent people, but to sabotage government structures that upheld apartheid. Mandela began traveling in disguise, moving across the country, raising support and building resistance. Soon, he became known as the Black Pimpernel because he was so skilled at avoiding capture. But in 1962, Mandela was arrested and charged with sabotage and treason. At his trial, instead of defending himself, he spoke boldly about justice. In his famous speech, he said, "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Mandela was sentenced to life imprisonment and sent to Robben Island, a bleak prison off the coast of Cape Town. Life there was harsh. He slept on a thin mat in a tiny cell with no bed and cruel guards. Prisoners were forced into hard labor in a limestone quarry. Mandela was allowed only one visitor and one letter every 6 months. Yet he refused to be broken. He studied and he taught younger prisoners about leadership and hope. He even learned the Afrikaans language so he could understand his enemies better. Mandela once said, "I am fundamentally an optimist." Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed towards the sun, one's feet moving forward. Year after year, his spirit grew stronger. He became more than a prisoner. He became a symbol of hope. Around the world, people chanted, "Free Nelson Mandela." His name appeared on banners, in songs, and in prayers. While the government tried to silence him, Mandela's voice only grew louder, carried by millions. Mandela spent 27 years in prison each day, a test of courage, but he never gave in. He knew his struggle was not just for himself, but for generations to come. On February 11th, 1990, the world held its breath. After 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela finally walked free. He was 71 years old, his hair grey, his body thinner, but his spirit unbroken. Crowds filled the streets, singing, crying, cheering. For many, it felt like a dream had come true. Mandela's first words after his release were filled with humility. "I stand here before you, not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you, the people. Today the time for healing of wounds has come." These words set the tone for the new South Africa he hoped to build. The years that followed were not easy. Many people wanted revenge for the decades of oppression, but Mandela chose a different path. He believed that forgiveness was the only way forward. Resentment, he said, is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. Instead of seeking revenge, he met with his former oppressors and worked with them to build unity. In 1994, history was made. For the first time, all South Africans, black, white, Indian coloured, could vote. People waited in long lines for hours to cast their ballots. On April 27th, Nelson Mandela was elected as the first black president of South Africa. His inauguration was attended by leaders from around the world. In his speech, he declared, "Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will experience the oppression of one by another," as President Mandela focused on reconciliation. One powerful moment came during the 1995 Rugby World Cup. Rugby had long been seen as a white man's sport, but Mandela wore the Springbok jersey and stood proudly with the team. When South Africa won, it became a symbol of unity for the entire nation. After serving one term, Mandela stepped down in 1999, proving that true leaders know when to let go of power. He spent his later years promoting peace education and the fight against poverty and HIV/AIDS. He met world leaders, inspired young people, and reminded everyone that hope and forgiveness are stronger than hate. On December 5th, 2013, Nelson Mandela passed away at the age of 95. The world mourned the loss of a great leader. The life of Nelson Mandela is more than a chapter in history. It is a reminder that no matter how dark the night, the dawn will always come. He was born in a small village, raised in hardship, and faced injustice every day of his life. Yet, he never let hatred define him. Instead, he chose forgiveness, courage, and hope. Mandela spent 27 years in prison, yet walked out with a smile. He could have chosen revenge, but instead, he chose peace. He proved that true strength isn't in fighting your enemies, but in reconciling with them. He showed that leadership is not about power, but about service to others. His words still echo across generations. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Mandela's life teaches us that failure is not the end, and his legacy calls us to be better, to stand for justice, to forgive, and to dream of a world where all people live as equals.